The Israeli army opened fire on a civilian demonstration in the Syrian southern town of Maariya. Moscow warned that increase in restrictions and price limits for Russian crude oil will influence the stability of the world oil market. Thousands of people in Havana, Cuba marched in protest against the U.S. blockade and Washington's unilateral inclusion of Cuba in a list of countries that allegedly sponsor terrorism. Hello and welcome to From the South. I'm Maariya Marrero from the teleSUR headquarters in Caracas, Venezuela. We'll give you the news. Stay with us. In Syria, the Israeli army opened fire on a civilian demonstration in the southern town of Maariya. The Israeli soldiers branded the group of demonstrators as suspicious and shot at them before asking them to back down. The Israeli military authorities said troops had, in accordance with open fire procedures, shot one of the demonstrators in the leg. Israel knows that it does not intervene in Syrian affairs, but its forces are advancing in several territories in order to make inroads into Damascus after terrorist groups overthrew President Bashar al-Assad. Thousands of Yemeni demonstrators gathered on Friday in Al-Sabin Square in the capital Sana'a in rejection of the permanent aggressions of the Israeli forces against the Gaza Strip. Under the slogan "With Gaza, there is jihad," mobilizations and mobilizations. The participants reiterated firm and unwavering support for the Palestinian people suffering in the genocide by the Zionist entity of Israel. The demonstration was called by the leader of the Houthi movement, Abdul Malik Bar al-Din al-Houthi, who urged the Yemenis to express their support for the Palestinian cause of freedom and resistance.
When the Israeli enemy thought that it had advanced and achieved an accomplishment in targeting the axis of resistance, it was met with a Yemeni escalation, and this confirms that Yemen is continuing to support Gaza without hesitation. The surrender process now is more dangerous than confrontation and not continuing to support Gaza.
No matter how much Israel escalates, we have means to confront it. Perhaps we will surround it with fighters like a bracelet on a wrist, sweep its land, and enter upon them with men who do not dig trenches but rather face death with all open hearts out of devotion to God.
The Russian government warned that the increase in restrictions and price limits for Russian crude oil will also influence the stability of the world oil market. Kremlin's press secretary Dmitry Peskov said his government will take the necessary measures to minimize the impact of the state's interests. In this regard, as on December 2022, the countries of the G7 imposed a price ceiling of $60 per barrel per Russian crude oil, in response to which Moscow banned sales to states that supported the illegal measure. Let's take a very short break, but remember you can join us on our TikTok account as teleSUR English, where you'll be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and more. Stay tuned for more news. Welcome back to From the South. In Spain, the government of Canary Islands, Fuerteventura, held a minute of silence in honor of those who lost their life in a shipwreck near Lanzarote on Wednesday. The municipality of Lanzarote deeply regretted the death of 4 people in the accident, where 46 others were rescued, and informed that search for at least 5 missing is still underway. At the same time, the city council assured that its representatives are in permanent contact with island security and emergency services to learn about the situation of the more than 350 migrants rescued in the last hours.
Así como acompañar en nuestro apoyo y solidaridad We provide our support and solidarity to the families of at least 5 people from this same boat who fell into the sea and whose bodies have not been recovered. It is inhumane and heartbreaking to commemorate the International Day of Migrants, and at the same time, off our coasts, for young people drowned due to the policies of dehumanization and restriction of mobility imposed by the European Union.
On Friday, Venezuelan Attorney General Tarek Williams have confirmed that Fernando Martinez Motola, a far-right activist from Venezuela, who have been residing in the Argentine embassy in Caracas, surrendered the Venezuelan authorities yesterday. The Public Prosecutor's Office informed that on Thursday, December 19, 2024, Mr. Fernando Martinez Motola, who was residing in the Embassy of the Republic of Argentina in Venezuela with a group of members of the extremist organization Vente Venezuela, who are fugitives, voluntarily presents himself at the main office of the Public Prosecutor's Office in Caracas. The aforementioned citizen was brought to justice and made statements at the Prosecutor's Office regarding the serious violent, the conspirational and destabilizing acts that have been organized from the aforementioned diplomatic headquarters during the last month after the presidential elections of July 28th. It is important to highlight that Martinez Motola decided to actively collaborate with the Venezuelan justice systems within the framework of the due process provided for in Article 49 of the Constitution of the Republic. Finally, the Public Prosecutor's Office, as a director and holder of the criminal investigation, remains firm in its duty to guarantee justice as well as in its fight against any national or international group or entity outside the law that attempts against the peace of the Venezuelan nation. Social sectors in Ecuador voiced the rejection of the construction of a new maximum security prison in a coastal area. The group says that the government didn't submit the project to a previous consultation with the area's residents. The indigenous people of the province also reject the site of the construction, which belongs to protect ancestral territories. On the other hand, several guilds of halteries, angler artisans, and Americans announced a mobilization for next December the 21st to voice the rejection against the construction of the prison, which was proposed to the government by the mayor of Salinas. In Panama, relatives and friends of the victims of the 1989 U.S. invasion of the country marks the historic event and demand that the murders committed during the invasion continue to be investigated and those responsible brought to justice. The event was attended by several states and ministers and directors of the government entities. 35 years ago, the U.S. invaded Panama in order to overthrow then President Manuel Antonio Nogueira, who Washington regarded as a dictator. The president of the Association of Relatives and Friends of those who fallen that day, Trinidad Yola, reaffirmed the main objective of the December 20, 1989 Commission, which is to investigate the crimes committed during the U.S. outlaw.
We have not been here in vain. With perseverance we have accomplished several goals, defeating a narrative of a fair cause, calling it an invasion, the investigation of crimes, human rights violations, through the creation of the Commission of December 20, 1989, and the Declaration of December 20, as a day of national mourning in 2022.
Let's take our last break, but before we invite you to visit our YouTube channel at teleSUR English, where you'll be able to watch on interviews, sub-stories, special broadcasts, and more. Hit the subscribe button and active the notification bell to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. But final short break, don't go away. Welcome back. Thousands of people in Havana, Cuba rallied on Friday to protest against the U.S. blockade against the Caribbean nation and Washington's unilateral inclusion of Cuba in a list of countries that allegedly sponsor terrorism. The demonstrators representing different sectors of the Cuban society marched along the iconic Malican Sea from driver passing by the U.S. Embassy, carrying placards with the slogan against the U.S. actions against Cuba and reaffirming the legendary spirit of struggle and victory of the Cuban people.
They don't know the Cuban people. They underestimate our patriotism and our revolution. Other spokespeople of the U.S. government and the anti-Cuban mafia who encourage the idea of this march against the U.S. people. We have nothing against the U.S. people or hatred against them, against those humble, noble people of that country. And we want to strengthen cooperation between the two nations. We extend our support to all of the governments of the U.S. since the Trump of the revolution, always looking for a serious relationship and equality. But if the U.S. insists in its disposition to break our independence, our sovereignty, our socialism, they will only find rebellion and perseverance.
Also, the president of Cuba condemned the blockade and the unilateral coercive measures imposed by the government of the United States.
We march now to say to the U.S. government, leave the Cuban people live in peace. Down with interference, down with the blockade, down with unilateral coercive measures against Cuba, down with the permanence of Cuba in the list of countries to sponsor terrorism, against genocide against the Cuban people. Socialism or death. Homeland or death, we will triumph.
Cuba held the closing of the fourth session of the Cuban parliament, in which President Miguel Díaz-Canel presented a balance sheet on government's actions in 2024. During the event, the president explained the enormous efforts and the still insufficient results of the presidential administration in the face of the obstacles imposed on the island, such as the U.S. blockade and the prevailing injustice in international economic relations. In his speech, the president called once again on the heroism, intelligence, and creativity that distinguish the Cuban people to overcome the difficulties faced by the island nation.
Marxists, Martianos, and Fidelistas, we will not get tired of fighting against the pro-imperialist, fascist, warlike, exclusionary, predatory currents that threaten humankind, and we will continue to insist on the development of the just and responsible humanist model of solidarity.
The president of Cuba, Miguel Díaz-Canel, points out the U.S. promotes the Israeli genocide against the Palestinian people and the use of nuclear weapons through the Organization of the North Atlantic Treaty Islands.
The threat of nuclear conflagration has been closer than ever before for more than half a century. The expansionist ambition of the imperialism promoted by the United States through NATO raises the danger of the use of nuclear weapons in Europe to seriously worrying limits. Israel's genocide against the Palestinian people, with the open support of the United States and other allies, is already one of the most merciless atrocities humanity has ever known, and it is taking place before the eyes of all with the impotence of the United Nations, the International Court, and the many international organizations supposedly designed to promote and protect human rights.
The Cuban president recalled that the administration of U.S. President Joe Biden tries to collapse the revolution of Cuba with the imposition of the unilateral coercive measures.
The awareness of what has been done in these 4 years by the outgoing government of the United States is to bet on the collapse of the revolution through the ruthless application of a system of coercive measures established by its predecessor to reinforce the economic blockade.
We have come to the end of this news brief, but you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on our socials. We're on Facebook, on X, and on Instagram as well. For Telesur English and from the South, I'm Maariya. Thank you for watching.